Voices Untold.
It was a Tuesday evening in February and Ryan made dinner. He doesn't cook often, so when he does, it means something. It always has. From the beginning of our marriage, when he cooked, it was because he wanted something, or because he had done something, or because he was about to say something he didn't know how to say any other way. I knew this about him. I had known it for years. I just didn't always let myself act on what I knew. He made pasta. He opened a good bottle of wine. He lit the candles on the kitchen table. I sat down and I looked at the candles and I thought, here we go. We ate for a while. He asked about my day. I told him about a meeting I'd had. He listened the way he always listened when he was waiting to say something, nodding at the right moments, asking small questions that showed he was tracking the conversation, but not really in it, not fully. Then he put his fork down. He said, "I've been thinking about something and I want to talk to you about it." I said, "Okay." He said, "I love you and I want you to know that before I say anything else. I love you and I think we are strong, and I think that's actually why I feel like I can bring this to you." I looked at him across the candles and I waited. He said he had been thinking about whether we might consider opening our marriage. He used those exact words, opening our marriage. Like it was a door, like it was something with a handle you could just turn. He said he had never done anything. He wanted to be clear about that. This was just something he had been thinking about, something he had read about, something he thought couples who were truly secure could explore. He used words like freedom and growth and honesty. He said he thought it could bring us closer. He said he would never suggest it if he didn't think we were strong enough. I sat there and I looked at him and I listened to every word. When he finished, I said, "I need some time to think about it." He nodded. He said, "Of course. Take all the time you need." He reached across the table and took my hand. He said, "I meant what I said about loving you." I said, "I know. I did not sleep that night. My name is Claire Henderson. I am 34 years old. I am a marketing director at a firm in Austin, Texas. I have been married to Ryan Henderson for 7 years. Ryan is an architect. He is 38 years old. He is tall and dark-haired and very good in a room full of people. The kind of man who remembers names and asks follow-up questions and makes everyone feel like the most interesting person he has spoken to all evening. I met him when I was 26 at a work event, a commercial real estate conference. I had gone with my boss at the time, a man named Patrick, who spent most of the evening on his phone. Ryan was standing near the bar. He introduced himself. He said, "What brings you to the most boring event in Austin?" I laughed. I said, "Honestly, Patrick," and I pointed to my boss, who was staring at his phone in the corner. Ryan said, "Your boss looks thrilled to be here." I said, "He always looks like that." Ryan laughed. We talked for 2 hours that night. He called me 3 days later. He said, "I know 3 days is the right amount of time to wait so you don't seem desperate, but I've been thinking about calling since Saturday, so I'm choosing to see that as a good sign." I said I would call it a very good sign. Our first date was dinner at a small restaurant on South Congress. He was already there when I arrived. He stood up when he saw me walk in. I remember thinking, who does that anymore? Who actually stands up? He did. He was good at the small things from the beginning. He remembered details I mentioned in passing. He showed up when he said he would. He was kind to people who could do nothing for him. Waiters, parking attendants, the woman at the coffee shop near his office, whose name he knew and asked about every time. I loved him for those things. I loved him for a long time. We dated for 2 years. We got married on a Saturday in October. Small ceremony, 70 people. A venue outside Austin that he had found and I had immediately loved the moment I saw it. We danced until midnight. My mother cried. My sister Emma caught the bouquet and turned bright red. The first years were good, genuinely good. We bought a house in Travis Heights, a 1950s bungalow with original tile and a back porch that looked out over the hill country. We traveled, we worked, we built something together that felt real and specific and ours. Ryan's firm grew. He made partner at 35. He was good at his work, genuinely talented. the kind of architect who understood that buildings were not just structures, they were experiences. He cared about how spaces made people feel. My firm grew. I became director at 32. I built relationships with clients that lasted because I was good at what I did and because I understood that in my industry, trust was everything. You built it slowly and carefully and you never took it for granted. We had a life, a real specific life with its own rhythms. Saturday mornings at the farmer's market, Friday evenings on the back porch with wine, summers in New Mexico where Ryan's family had a cabin, Christmases at my mother's in Dallas, an annual trip to Mexico every January that we had taken every year since our 3rd year of marriage. I loved him. I want to say that clearly. I loved him and the life we had, and I believed he loved me back. I believed that right up until the Tuesday evening he made pasta and lit candles and told me he wanted to open our marriage. After that evening, I could not stop thinking. Not about the request itself, not about whether I wanted to say yes or no, but about why he was asking now. Why, after 7 years of a marriage that seemed good? Why now? Why at 38? Why on a Tuesday in February with candles and a good bottle of wine? I am a marketing director. I think about messaging for a living. I think about what people say, and more importantly, what they are not saying. I think about timing. I think about why someone chooses to deliver a particular message in a particular way at a particular moment. The candles bothered me. Ryan didn't do things without a reason. He was not a spontaneous person. He was deliberate. He planned things. He thought about how to present things. He was the kind of person who considered angles. The candles were an angle. I started paying attention the way I hadn't been paying attention before. I started noticing small things the way you notice them when you are finally willing to see what they add up to. His phone was always face down on the table. We'd been doing this for years, together. He would put his phone face down, and I had never thought anything of it. It was just a thing he did, a habit. Then I started thinking about when it had started, and I couldn't actually remember a time when it hadn't been face down, and I thought about how long I had been not thinking about that. He took calls in his car sometimes. He would come inside and say, "Work, sorry." I would hear him through the kitchen window when I was cooking. The low murmur of his voice, not the words, just the sound of him talking to someone he didn't want me to hear. He had started going to the gym on Sunday mornings. He said he needed the routine. He said it was good for his head. I had said, of course. I didn't think about the timing of when he had started. I thought about all of it now. I gave myself a week before I said anything to anyone. Then I called my sister Emma. Emma works at the same architectural firm as Ryan, not in his department. She's on the administrative side. She has worked there for 3 years. Ryan had recommended her for the position when the job came up. I had thought that was generous. I had been grateful. I called her on a Saturday morning. Ryan was at the gym. I told her about the open marriage conversation, word for word, what Ryan had said and how he had said it. There was a silence on her end, a silence that went just slightly too long. She said, "Claire." Just my name. Just that. I said, "Emma." "What do you know?" Another silence. She said, "I don't know anything for certain." I said, "That's not what I asked." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said there was a woman at the firm. Her name was Serena. She was a junior architect. She'd been there for about 2 years. Emma had seen them together in the building a few times, just in the corridors, just talking. But the way they talked, and the way they looked at each other, she hadn't said anything because she wasn't certain, and because she didn't want to be the person who said something and was wrong. I sat with that. I said, "How long have you been noticing this?" She said about a year, maybe a little more. I said, "Okay." She said, "Claire, I'm so sorry." I said, "Don't be sorry yet." I had heard what Emma said, and I had filed it away, and now I needed to find the thing, one specific, undeniable thing. 2 weeks after the dinner, I was home alone on a Saturday. Ryan had told me he was going to the office. He had a deadline on a project the following week. He went in sometimes on Saturdays. It wasn't unusual. I was looking for our car insurance documents. We had a renewal coming up and I couldn't find the folder. I thought I had seen it in Ryan's home office. I went in to look. I went through the filing cabinet first. I didn't find what I was looking for. I tried his desk, the main drawer, the side drawers, and then the back drawer, the one he kept locked. It wasn't locked that day. I don't know if he forgot or if he had been in a hurry that morning. I just know that when I pulled it, the drawer opened. Inside, there was a birthday card, plain white envelope with his name written on the front in handwriting that was not mine. I knew immediately it was not mine. The handwriting was smaller than mine, neater, more careful. The kind of handwriting that belongs to someone who takes their time. I stood there for a moment. Then I picked it up. Inside the card was a small photograph, a picture of Ryan and a woman I didn't recognize, sitting at a restaurant table laughing at something. Both of them completely unguarded, completely natural, the way people look when they forget anyone is watching. The woman was young, late 20s, dark hair, bright smile, the kind of face that is pretty in an effortless way. Underneath the photograph, someone had written in the same neat, careful handwriting, "I know we can't do this properly yet, but one day, happy birthday, always yours. S." The card was dated 14 months ago. I stood in Ryan's home office holding that card for a long time. I felt sick. I felt cold. I felt my hands go completely still, the way hands go still when the body understands something before the brain catches up. I put the card back exactly where I had found it. I closed the drawer. I left the office. I sat down at the kitchen table and I stared at the wall. S. I thought about Emma. I thought about the woman in the corridors, the way they look at each other. I thought about the candles and the pasta and the good bottle of wine. I thought about freedom and growth and honesty, and I know we can't do this properly yet, but one day, he hadn't been thinking about opening our marriage. He had been trying to open a door that was already open. I called Emma that afternoon. I described the woman in the photograph. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she said that sounded like Serena. That sounded exactly like her. Her full name was Serena Walsh. She was 29 years old. She had joined Ryan's firm 2 years and 3 months ago. I found her LinkedIn profile that evening. Professional, measured, a headshot in a gray blazer, a list of projects and credentials. I went through every line of it. I sat with all of it for 3 days. I didn't say anything to Ryan. Those 3 days were strange, quiet days. On the surface, nothing changed. Ryan came home for dinner. We talked about our days. We sat on the back porch in the evenings with wine. He was warm. He was attentive, the way he had been since the Tuesday conversation. Slightly more present than usual, the way people are when they are managing something. I watched him. I need to tell you something about my job before I tell you the rest of this. I need to tell you something about my work before I tell you what happened next. I manage marketing for a firm in Austin. My biggest client is a commercial real estate developer called Summit. They are the largest developer in Central Texas. I have had their account for 4 years. I built that relationship myself from nothing. When Summit first came to us, they had good projects and terrible marketing. I spent years fixing that. By year 3, their CEO, a man named David Park, told me I was the best marketing relationship he had ever had. David trusted me completely. He called me directly. He asked my opinion on things. He made decisions based on what I thought. And for the past 6 months, Summit had been looking for an architect for their biggest project ever, a major downtown development. The architectural fees alone were $2.3 million. Ryan's firm was on the short list. He had been pitching for it for months. He told me about every meeting, every presentation. I listened. I said it sounded incredible. I said I knew he was going to get it. What I did not tell him was that David Park called me every 2 weeks to talk through the shortlisted firms. What I did not tell him was that David had said to me 3 weeks before the Tuesday dinner, "Claire, I trust your judgment on this more than I trust my own board's. I'm going to make this decision based largely on what you think." I had not said any of that to Ryan, not because I was hiding it. It was just mine, my work, my relationship, And when I found that birthday card in his drawer, I understood for the first time exactly why it mattered that he had never known. I gave myself 1 week. I called my friend Patricia on the Monday after I found the card. Patricia is a family law attorney in Austin. She is methodical, careful, and completely without sentimentality when it comes to these things. She is exactly the person you want on your side when everything is about to change. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked 3 questions. She asked about the joint accounts. She asked about the house. She asked about any assets in my name only. I answered everything. She told me exactly what to do. I spent the following week doing precisely that. Quietly, carefully, without showing anything. I moved my salary, savings, and personal investments into an account in my name only. Everything that was legally mine. Everything that Patricia confirmed was mine. I did it in 3 phone calls over 2 days. Done. Then I called David Park. I want to be very clear about what I said to David. I did not say anything about Ryan. I did not use my position with Summit to harm him professionally. I did not abuse David's trust in me. What I did was answer a question David had already asked me. He had asked me 3 weeks earlier, "Claire, I need to know what you think about the shortlisted firms before we make this decision." I had not answered then. I answered now. I called David on a Wednesday morning. I said, "David, I want to give you my honest assessment of the shortlisted firms before you finalize the decision." He said, "I've been waiting for this call, Claire. Sit down and tell me everything." I told him what I genuinely thought about each firm on the shortlist. I was honest. I was fair. I did not lie about anything. I did not fabricate anything. I assessed each firm on its actual merits. Ryan's firm was good. They did good work. But there was another firm on the shortlist, Fuller Associates, who in my honest professional judgment were the stronger choice for this specific project. Their experience with mixed-use towers was more relevant. Their proposed timeline was more realistic. Their fee structure was more transparent. I told David that. I told him because it was true, and because he had asked me, and because my job was to give David Park my honest professional opinion, not to protect my husband's business interests. David said, "Claire, I think you're right. I've been leaning that way for 2 weeks, but I wanted to hear you say it." He made the decision that afternoon. Fuller Associates got the Summit Downtown project. Ryan did not know yet. I gave myself 3 more days before I said anything to Ryan. Those 3 days were the hardest part, not because I was uncertain. I was past uncertain, but because I still had to sit across from him at dinner and sleep beside him at night and watch him move through our house like a man with nothing to hide. On the second evening, he suggested we talk more about the open marriage conversation. He said he didn't want it to just sit there between us. He said he wanted to know how I was feeling about it. I looked at him across the kitchen table. I said, "I'm still thinking." He nodded. He said, "Take your time." He said there was no pressure. I looked at his face while he said it. I looked for the thing underneath it, the urgency he was managing, the timeline he was trying to stay ahead of. I could see it if I looked carefully enough. I could see the shape of what he was actually asking for underneath all the careful language about freedom and growth. He needed an answer because Serena was waiting for one. The evening the folder came out was a Thursday. Ryan came home at his usual time. He came into the kitchen and put his bag down and opened the fridge the way he did every evening and stood there looking at the shelves. He turned around and saw me at the table. He saw the folder. He saw my face. He was very still for a moment. Then he came and sat down. I said, "I've been thinking about your question." He said, "Okay." His voice was careful. I said, "I have one question before I give you my answer." He said, "Of course." I said, "How long have you been seeing Serena Walsh?" The silence that followed was the longest silence of our entire marriage. I watched his face. I watched the thing move across it. The calculation, the assessment, the decision about which way to play it. I watched him decide that denying it wasn't going to work and move to the next position. He said, "It's not what you think." I said, "I found the birthday card, Ryan. I know we can't do this properly yet, but one day, always yours, S. He said nothing. I said, "How long?" He said it had started about 2 years ago. 2 years and 3 months before he asked me to open our marriage. 8 weeks after she gave him that birthday card, he sat across from me with pasta and candles and a good bottle of wine and asked if we could explore freedom and honesty and growth. I sat with that for a moment. I said, "So the open marriage conversation was never about us?" He said, Claire, I said, "It was about giving yourself permission for something you were already doing." He said he had been going to end it. He thought if we opened the marriage, he could... I said, "You were going to end it with her by asking your wife if she was okay with you sleeping with other people." He looked at the table. I slid the folder across it. He looked down at it. He looked back up at me. I said, "Those are divorce papers. Patricia filed them this morning. You need to get your own attorney before you sign anything." He said, "Claire, please. Just listen to me for 1 minute. I love you. This was a mistake. I know it was a mistake. I know I should have ended it. I know I handled everything wrong. But our marriage is real. What we have is real. Please just..." I said, "Ryan, there's something else you should know." He stopped. I said, "Summit Development Group made their decision on the downtown project this week." Something moved behind his eyes. I said, "They went with Fuller Associates." He stared at me. He said, "What?" I said, "David Park called me 3 weeks ago and asked for my professional assessment of the shortlisted firms. I gave him my honest opinion. Fuller Associates were the stronger choice for this project. I told him that because it was true." He said, "You knew about the Summit project." I said, "I've managed David Park's account for 4 years, Ryan. I know everything about Summit's projects." He said, "You never told me." I said, "You never asked." He was very still. I said, "I want to be clear about something. I did not call David to hurt you. I called him because he had asked for my assessment, and I owed him an honest answer. My job is to give David Park my best professional judgment, not to protect your firm's business interests. You understand the difference." He said nothing for a long time. Then he said, "Did you know before the card? Did you know before you called David?" I said, "I called David the Wednesday after I found the card." He understood what that meant. He understood the sequence. I had found the card. I had called Patricia. I had moved the money. I had called David. I had done all of it quietly and carefully and in exactly the right order before I said a single word to him. He put his face in his hands. I sat there and I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Not triumph, not satisfaction, just a very quiet sadness for the 7 years that had been real before they became something else. For the man he had been at the beginning, the one who had stood up when I walked into the restaurant, the one who had called after 3 days because he couldn't wait any longer. That man had been real. I hadn't imagined him. He had just chosen to become someone else. At the front door, he stopped. He said, "Claire, I need you to know I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean anything right now, but I am." I said, "I know you are." He picked up his bag and he left. I called Emma. I said, "He's gone." She came over that night. We sat on the back porch until midnight. She held my hand and we looked out at the hill country and we didn't say very much. There wasn't very much to say. The divorce was finalized 7 months later. Patricia was thorough. She didn't let anything go. The house in Travis Heights was mine. Ryan moved into an apartment in East Austin. Modern, clean, no history. I drove past it once, about 4 months after it was final. I looked at it from the car for a moment. Then I drove on. I heard through mutual friends that Ryan and Serena lasted 5 months after the divorce. I didn't feel anything about that. That chapter was completely closed. The first months alone were quiet in a way I hadn't expected. The house felt large. My own footsteps felt loud. I would come home and stand in the kitchen in the silence and think, this is what it sounds like now. This is the sound of your life. I cooked things Ryan had never liked. I rearranged the furniture. I played music through the whole house at volumes that would have annoyed him. I made decisions about small things without consulting anyone, without negotiating, without considering another person's preferences. And I found that those small freedoms, the real ones, the ones nobody asks for permission for, those were the ones that had mattered most all along. He had wanted freedom. He had asked me for it with candles and a good bottle of wine. I had found it by myself in the quiet of a house that was finally entirely mine. I threw myself into work. My firm had its best year. The Summit relationship deepened. David Park referred us to 3 new clients in the following 12 months. One of those clients became our second largest account. One evening, about 8 months after the divorce was final, David called me. Not about work, just to check in. He said, "Claire, I want to say something to you. In 20 years of doing business in this city, I have never worked with anyone I trusted more than I trust you. Whatever happened last year with that decision, I know it cost you something, and I want you to know I see that." I said, "David, it didn't cost me anything I wanted to keep." He laughed. He said, "That's exactly what I mean." I want to tell you about Emma. Emma is 3 years younger than me. She is quieter than me. She has always been quieter. She is the kind of person who watches a room before she enters it, who listens more than she speaks, who notices things and keeps them to herself until she is certain. She had been keeping something for a year before she told me. After the divorce was final, we talked properly about it for the first time. She told me everything she had seen. Ryan and Serena in the corridors of the firm 6 or 7 times over the course of a year. Not doing anything, not touching, just talking. But the way they talked, and the way they looked at each other, and the way they went quiet when anyone walked past was enough. She said, "I knew, Claire. I knew from the first time I saw them together, but I also knew I could be wrong. And if I was wrong, I would have destroyed your marriage for nothing." I said, "Emma, you wouldn't have destroyed anything." She said, "I know that now." I said, "Why didn't you tell me?" She said, "Because you were happy, or you seemed happy, and I kept thinking maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm imagining it. And then one day you called me and told me about the open marriage conversation, and the silence I heard from you in that moment told me everything I needed to know about what you already suspected." I sat with that for a moment. I don't blame Emma for waiting. I probably would have done the same thing. You don't want to be the person who says something like that and turns out to be wrong. You don't want to be the one who blows up a marriage on a feeling. But I think about those months, all those months between the first time she saw them and the Tuesday evening with the candles and the pasta. All those months I spent telling myself I was wrong about what I was seeing. She knew. She was sitting with it the whole time, waiting for me to be ready. Emma and I are closer now than we have ever been. She came over the night Ryan left. She brought wine and food and stayed until midnight. We didn't say very much. There wasn't very much to say. But she was there. That was enough. The week before I found the card was an ordinary week. Nothing specific, nothing dramatic. Just an ordinary week in February in Austin. Cold mornings and warm afternoons. Ryan working late on Tuesday and Thursday, the gym on Sunday, the phone face down at dinner. But that week, something caught me. Something I had been stepping around without realizing it. I was doing a load of his laundry on a Thursday morning. I picked up his gray sport coat, the one he wore to client dinners, the one I had bought him for his birthday 2 years ago, and I found myself checking the pockets without thinking about it. The way my mother had always checked pockets. "You always check pockets," she used to say. She told a story about a receipt that went through the wash, a restaurant she didn't recognize, a name she didn't know. She told that story once and never told it again, and I was 12 years old and I didn't understand what it meant until I was much older. I checked Ryan's pockets that Thursday morning. There was nothing in them, nothing at all. And I stood there in our bedroom holding that empty jacket and I thought, "You are looking for something, Claire. You are already looking." That was the week before I found the card. I think about that now. How the body knows before the mind admits it. How I was already checking pockets, already looking, already preparing for something I wasn't ready to name. The card in the drawer was not a surprise. It was a confirmation. There is a difference, and that difference matters. It did not happen overnight. It never does. And I want you to understand what it looks like when it is happening slowly, from the inside, when you are the person it is happening to. In year 5 of our marriage, Ryan started traveling more client meetings out of town, more conferences, more weekends where he had to fly somewhere for something that couldn't be done over the phone. I understood that. His firm was growing. Bigger projects meant more travel. I had been through my own version of it when my firm was expanding, and I had asked Ryan to be patient, and he had been. I owed him the same. In year 6, he started coming home later. Not dramatically later, just late enough that dinner was always cold, just late enough that by the time we got into bed, we were both too tired to talk about anything that actually mattered, just late enough that the life we had built together started to feel like a performance of a life rather than the real thing. I told myself it was the pressure of the partnership, temporary, the kind of thing all marriages go through. The rhythm shifts, and then it finds itself again. Then I started noticing the small things, the phone face down, the calls in the car, the gym on Sunday mornings that had started in March of the previous year, which I now understood was almost exactly when Serena had joined the firm. I noticed that he had a new cologne, not his usual one, something lighter, younger. He wore it on the days he said he was going into the office. He didn't wear it on the weekends. I noticed that. I filed it away and said nothing. I noticed that he was more careful with his phone at night. Before, it had always charged on the nightstand and I could see when a message came in. Now, it charged across the room, on silent. The first time he moved it, I noticed. I didn't say anything. I noticed that he had started shaving on mornings he claimed to be working from home. A man who is working from home does not shave at 7 in the morning. A man who is going somewhere he wants to look good does. I noticed all of it. I am a marketing director. I notice details for a living. I notice when a message is inconsistent. I notice when the presentation doesn't match the product. I notice when someone is telling me one thing and showing me another. I cannot turn it off. It is what I do. But I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself I was being paranoid, that successful men get distracted, that this was just what long marriages looked like sometimes, that I was projecting. I told myself that for months, and the whole time in a locked drawer in his home office, a birthday card sat in a white envelope with his name on it in someone else's careful handwriting. The Saturday after I found the card, Ryan was at the office again. He went in most Saturday mornings during that period. He had said it was a deadline. I know now it was Serena. I was alone in the house. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table. I looked out at the back porch and the hill country beyond it. The rolling green and the pale sky and the cedar trees along the ridge. The view I had loved since the day we moved in. I sat there until the coffee went cold. Then I called Patricia. Patricia and I had been friends for 8 years. We had met at a networking event when she was in her first year of law school, and I was dating a law student at the time, and had somehow ended up at a function I had no business attending. Patricia was standing near the door looking like she was also wondering why she had come. We started talking. We talked for 2 hours. She called me the next day. She said, "I don't make friends easily, so I want to be direct. I think we should be friends." I had laughed. I had said I thought so too. She had been my attorney for business contracts for 6 years by the time I called her that Saturday morning. She knew my professional life completely. She knew about Summit. She knew about David Park. She knew exactly what that account had taken to build. She did not know about Ryan until that Saturday morning. I told her everything. She listened the way she always listens, completely still, completely focused, asking nothing until I had finished. When I finished, she said, "How long have you known?" I said, "Months." She said, "And you're certain?" I said, "I found a birthday card." She said, "That's enough." She told me what to do. I wrote everything down. I followed every instruction exactly. And when I was done, I felt the specific feeling of a person who has stopped waiting and started moving. It is a different feeling from grief and different from anger. It is quieter than both. It is the feeling of a door you have been standing outside finally opening and you walking through it. The 2 weeks between finding the card and sitting down at the kitchen table with the folder were the strangest 2 weeks of my life. I went to work, I attended meetings, I had lunch with clients, I presented campaign strategies and reviewed copy and gave feedback on design work. I was completely present in every professional moment because my professional life was the one place where everything was exactly what it appeared to be, where I was exactly who I said I was, where the work was real and the relationships were real and nothing was hidden. I came home and I was a different kind of present. I watched Ryan carefully, the way you watch something when you finally stop pretending not to see it. He was attentive and warm and slightly guilty in the way people are when they are managing a conscience. Coffee in the morning, questions about my day, suggestions for things we could do together at the weekend, the version of himself he became when he needed to compensate for something. I said the right things. I smiled at the right moments. I asked the questions a wife asks. Inside, I was completely still. The stillness surprised me. I had expected to feel more. I had expected the grief to be louder, the anger to be bigger. Instead, there was just this deep, quiet stillness, like a room after everyone has left, like a building late at night when the lights are off and everything is exactly where it is supposed to be. I think the grief had already happened. I think I had been grieving quietly for months without knowing that is what I was doing. All those evenings looking away from what I already knew. All those nights lying awake, all those mornings checking pockets and finding nothing and not being relieved. The grief had already done most of its work. What was left was just the finishing of something that had been ending for a long time. One evening during those 2 weeks, Ryan and I sat on the back porch together. It was a warm evening for February, the kind Austin gets sometimes, a preview of the spring that is coming. The air smelled like cedar, and the light was going golden over the hills. Ryan poured wine. He handed me a glass. He sat back in his chair and looked out at the view. He said, "I love this house." I said, "I know." He said, "I love this view. I think about it when I'm at work sometimes. I think about sitting here in the evening." I said, "Me too." He said, "Aunt Claire, I want you to know that whatever we decide about the conversation we had, I'm not going anywhere. I want you to know that." I looked at him. I said, "I know, Ryan." And I did know. It just wasn't true. There was one moment when I almost said something. We were getting ready for bed about a week before the Thursday with the folder. He was standing at the bathroom mirror. He looked at me in the reflection. Not the casual kind of look, the real kind. The kind where someone is actually looking at you. He said, "You okay?" I looked back at him in that mirror, and for 1 second I felt the full weight of everything I was carrying, everything I knew, everything that was about to change. I said, "I'm fine, just tired." He nodded. He went back to what he was doing, and I stood there and I thought, that is the last time you will ever look at me like that. The last time you will ever see me and wonder if I'm okay. Because after this, everything will be different, and you will spend a long time understanding why. I want to be honest about what it felt like in that kitchen on the Thursday evening when Ryan walked in and saw the folder. I had expected to feel powerful. I had spent 2 weeks preparing for that moment, 2 weeks being careful and precise and methodical. I had expected to feel the satisfaction of something executed exactly right. What I felt was tired, not defeated, not broken, just tired. The specific tiredness of someone who has been carrying something heavy for a very long time and is finally, at last, putting it down. And underneath the tiredness, something else, something I hadn't expected and couldn't fully name until much later. Relief, not the relief of revenge, not the relief of winning, just the relief of the truth finally being in the room, of not having to hold everything in place anymore, of being able to stop pretending. I had been pretending for months, pretending not to know, pretending not to notice, pretending that the life we had was still the life I thought it was. The folder on the table meant I didn't have to pretend anymore. After Ryan left that evening, I sat in the kitchen and did not move. I looked around at the house. The kitchen we had renovated together in year 3. The back porch we had built the summer after that. The hallway lined with photographs from 9 years of a life that had been real for most of its length. I thought about the man who had stood up at the restaurant on South Congress when I walked in. I thought about him calling after 3 days because he couldn't wait any longer. I thought about the first date and the sunflowers. No, Ryan hadn't brought sunflowers. That was someone else's story, a story I had heard once about another woman in another city. Ryan had brought a single white gardenia. He had said, "I heard gardenias are for people who pay attention to things." I had not told him I liked gardenias. He had figured it out from something I had said in passing at the conference. One small detail, remembered and used at exactly the right moment. That man had been real. He had existed, and I had loved him. And then, somewhere in the middle of 7 years, he had made choices that took him so far from who he was that the person sitting across from me in the last months of the marriage was almost unrecognizable. I don't know exactly when it happened. I just know that it did and that it couldn't be undone. I cried that night. I want to be honest about that. I cried for a long time, alone in the house, not because I was surprised, I was past surprised, but because it was completely real now. The marriage was over. The man I had loved for 7 years was not who I thought he was. And even though I had known that for months, having it be completely confirmed and finished and real was different. It hurt in a way I had not fully anticipated. I cried for the good years. I cried for the farmhouse venue in October and the dancing until midnight, and my mother crying in the front row. I cried for the bungalow in Travis Heights, and the original tile and the back porch and the view. I cried for the Mexico trips, all 5 of them, each one different, each one good in its own particular way. I cried for the version of Ryan I had believed in, the version that may have existed once and then quietly stopped existing somewhere in the middle of 7 years. And then I stopped. I made coffee. I called Patricia. I went back to work. The divorce took 7 months. Patricia was thorough. She didn't let anything go. Every account, every asset, every contribution I had made to the life we had built together, she documented it, argued for it, and protected it. The house was mine. My investments were mine. My professional relationships were mine. The Summit account was mine. Ryan's attorney raised the Summit account once. Patricia put it to rest in a single meeting. When it was over, I stood in the hallway of the house in Travis Heights, and I looked at the photographs on the wall. 9 years of a life. Travels and dinners and ordinary Sundays and holidays and moments I had been happy enough to photograph. I took some of them down, not all of them. Some of them were still true. The trip to the mountains in New Mexico. Emma's birthday in the 3rd year when we had all gone to the coast. A morning in Mexico with the light coming across the water and both of us laughing at something neither of us could remember afterward. Those had been real. They could stay. The ones that were about him and me, about what I had believed we were. Those I put in a box, not throwing them away, just not needing them on the wall anymore. I put a plant in one of the spaces, a monstera that a friend had given me years ago and that had always lived in my office. I brought it home. It took up exactly the right amount of wall. It is a Saturday morning now. I am sitting on the back porch of my house in Travis Heights. The coffee is hot. The light is coming up over the hills. The cedar trees along the ridge are that specific green they go in the morning before the sun gets too high. This is my house, not our house, not anymore. Just mine. The house I come home to. The view I look at. The mornings I have all to myself. On my desk inside, there's a photograph of my mother. She is sitting in her garden in Dallas in a pale yellow cardigan, her hands folded in her lap, smiling the way she smiles when she has figured something out that other people haven't figured out yet. She called me the week the divorce was final. She said, "Claire, I want to say something and I want you to just let me say it." I said, "Okay." She said, "I never told you this because I didn't think it was my place, but I always thought you were too good at managing things, too good at making things work that maybe shouldn't have been worked so hard at. And I thought one day you were going to stop managing and start choosing, and I think that's what you did." I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I said, "I think you're right." She said, "Good, now come home for the weekend. I'll cook." I went. We sat in her garden on the Saturday afternoon, and she told me stories about my grandmother and her own marriage, and things I had never known, and things I had half known, and things that made me understand my own life a little better than I had before. Some things take a long time to arrive. You don't know you are working toward them. You just make choices. You build a client relationship over years. You answer your sister's call and actually listen. You check the pockets of a jacket and feel something shift inside you that you are not ready to name yet. You call the right person at the right time. And then one day, it all lands in one moment. Ryan had sat across from me with pasta and candles and a good bottle of wine and asked me if we could open our marriage. He had no idea. He didn't know about David Park. He didn't know about Patricia. He didn't know about Emma watching them in the corridors of his own firm. He didn't know about any of it. He looked at me that Tuesday evening, and he saw his wife, a patient wife, a wife who would think about it and probably say yes. He had no idea who he was actually sitting across from. He thought he was the one with the plan. He wasn't. My name is Claire Henderson. I am 34 years old. I am a marketing director in Austin, Texas. I have a back porch and a hill country view, and a client who trusts me completely, and a sister who came over with wine when I needed her, and a mother who told me the truth when I was ready to hear it, and a house that is entirely mine. I built all of it, quietly, while nobody was paying attention. That is the only kind of building that lasts.